The value continues for the jump season at Ladbrokes as the race that stops a nation approaches in the form of the Aintree Grand National. And in all of Ladbrokes Republic of Ireland retail shops, we are paying out on the first 6 home. That's 6 places at a fifth of the odds on the Aintree Grand National at Ladbrokes. Over 18s, T's and C's apply.
Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast with Robbie Vino as our guest. We're talking all things college basketball, the Final Four look ahead, NIT Final Four, CBI Championship Series. We got it all coming ahead on today's podcast. It's April 1st, April Fool's Day. Don't be fooled by any of your friends or work companions, your wife, anything like that. It is April Fool's. So, Robbie, happy April Fool's to you. Welcome into the podcast. How are you?
Glad to be here, Drew. Happy April Fool's to you as well.
All right, man. Well, Robbie,
we're not trying to trick anybody on the podcast here. We're coming straight at you, so we're not trying to do anything tricky for the listeners out there.
No, nothing tricky at all. Robbie Vino's got his free play up on the Los Angeles Angels, Seattle Mariners tonight on Sportsmemo.com. It's $9 Monday at Sportsmemo.com. That's not April Fool's. All plays are discounted to just $9. Even the 5%ers, normally $30, discounted to just $9. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, that means that it's $2 Tuesday. So the top handicapper, which is Alex B. Smith, actually, in hockey, his top play will be discounted to just $2 on the site. So Monday and Tuesday, great days to check out sportsmemo.com. But this is all about college basketball with Robbie Vino. And Rob, we got the Final Four. We get, the NIT Final Four. We got the CBI tonight. We're going to talk it all. Let's start off with the CBI game tonight. We got Depaul versus South Florida. Looks like the line is 2 here with South Florida at home. And the CBI is a 3-game championship series. This is a smaller conference tournament. I believe it was 16 teams. They whittle it down to 2. And now they play a 3-game series, DePaul versus South Florida. The first game in Tampa. The next 2, DePaul will be at home. It's 151 the total. South Florida -2 tonight. I'm looking towards the Bulls. I didn't release it to the clients or anything like that, but I think that South Florida has an advantage tonight in laying just the 2 points. I think that there's value on the home team. How do you view DePaul versus South Florida?
Yeah, and the first thing with this tournament, the CBI, Drew, is game 1 almost becomes a must-win for the home team. As you just mentioned, DePaul's going to get home floor game 2, and if necessary, game 3. So for South Florida, this is it at home. You have to grab game 1. So from that situational perspective, you would like the home team in this game. We've seen a bump from the opener of 1.5 up to 2 across the board here today. See a stray 2.5 out there as we speak. But that is not just a small situational angle. That's an important situational angle here, because if DePaul comes in and wins game 1 and then has the next 2 at home, it's going to be very, very difficult for South Florida. This is another game. We're down to very few college basketball games for this week as all these tournaments wind down to crowning champions. But this is one of those games, Drew, where, again, we're going to have a style contrast. South Florida, we see what they do to other teams with their defense and their pace. They keep the games low scoring. DePaul, on the other hand, has been an offensive juggernaut throughout this tournament. They have averaged, I think, 96 points per game in this tournament right now. So for South Florida, I think pace is very important. For DePaul, obviously, on the other end of that spectrum, pace is very important to them too. I like the South Florida guard play. The only thing that you can't really trust with South Florida, I mean, it's an asset and then it's a liability at the same time. They get to the free throw line a lot during games. They get to the free throw line as much as anybody in the country almost, but then when they get there, they don't make the free throws. They're a poor free throw shooting team. So getting there is one thing, knocking them down is something else. If you're in a close game, you worry a little bit about South Florida at the free throw line. But I think if you just look at the player matchups, South Florida has the defensive backcourt to be able to slow DePaul down a little bit. And like I say, I think if you weren't going to play South Florida in game 1, the home team, then you probably shouldn't play it at all. I wouldn't recommend the visitor here. the total at 151.5 caught my eye early. We've seen it. It's kind of erratic across the board here. We see some 150.5s, we see some 151s, but to me it seemed a little bit high. We've watched South Florida certainly limit good opponents point-wise throughout the season, so maybe a play on the under. If you can find those 151.5s out there still, I think that might be a good way to go.
And Robbie, the new rules for the NIT, that's not in the CBI, correct?
No, the NIT, the widening of the lane and the backing up of the 3-point line that's NIT exclusively, yeah.
Right, and so that factors in on the total as well. As far as the South Florida side, I mean, their sophomore guard, David Collins, he's averaging 16 points a game. Their point guard, Radu, he's 13 points, 5.4 assists per game. Their heavy guard play. Also, they're a good team, 3-point defense, a stat that I love. Overall defense, they're very good. They're a very good rebounding team. But you bring up the point of South Florida struggling on the free throw line, and it is real. They get to the free throw line a lot. It's kind of surprising how bad of a free throw shooting team they are, considering they try to get to the line so much. And it's almost a situation, I don't buy points very much, but seeing this -2, I would love to see it at -1, just because, if it falls at that one number, I think that USF is the side, but teams that struggle with free throws, I hate laying numbers with those types of teams. So looking into buying a point on this. But the CBI tournament, this is the tournament North Texas won over the San Francisco Dons last year in the 3-game series. And I agree with you. I think tonight's the night to be betting USF here. And then in the next 2 games, actually probably looking to bet Depaul. But yeah, tonight I'm looking towards the USF side as well. And one thing here on the Depaul point guard, he should play. He was in concussion protocol, but he was out last game, and he should play tonight. So overall, looking towards the USF side. Robbie, anything else on this game before we move to the NIT in the Final Four?
Yeah, just when you look at head coaches, Drew, a lot of times I know guys that will handicap these games with head coaching matchups, not at the top of their list, but near the top of their list. Yeah, Brian Gregory, who has been a defensive-minded coach his entire career. So with so much time between games from the last time these two teams played inside this tournament, you think there's enough preparation time for Brian Gregory to devise something in order to slow DePaul down a little bit, and of course for Dave Leto and the DePaul Blue Demons, same goes there. But I'm with you. I think situationally this tournament's unique, and if you get the first game at home knowing you have to travel game 2 and if necessary game 3, then one just becomes a must for the home team, no doubt about it.
All right, Robbie. And guys, it's $9 Monday. Check out Rob Vino's handicapper page. He has a bunch of plays up for tonight. MLB Monday premier game of the night, and NBA Eastern Conference premier total. And his NBA has been on fire, 70 and 54, 56% the last 6 months. That's in the NBA. NBA is a tough sport to beat. There aren't many people in the industry that can beat it. Robbie is so far this year. He's also got another MLB play and another NBA play up as well. All of those plays discounted to just $9. Robbie, let's talk the NIT Final Four, and then we'll end it with the Final Four here. The top of the card for Tuesday night, 7 p.m., Wichita State, Lipscomb. Looks like Pick'em -1. That's Wichita State laying in this one, 150.5. This one in Madison Square Gardens. Robbie, how do you look to bet it?
Yeah, it's a matchup of two extremely hot teams. Wichita State obviously coming from off the pace, to use a horse racing term, mid-season. Greg Marshall kind of got it together with these guys. They started as usual, like a usual Wichita State team would, through the defensive end. They created some offense because the offense outside of McDuffie had been absolutely miserable all season long. But then things started to fall into place. They can play either way, Drew, which makes the total in this game kind of interesting. Wichita State, go through their game logs, watch a bunch of their games, and you'll see games where they can grind it out 60-58, and then you'll find other games where they can get up and down 81-77 or something in that vicinity. Obviously, Lipscomb would love to go ahead and play the quicker pace. So many guys on this team that we remember from last year. Garrison Matthews, the star of the team, but, Rob Marbury, Eli Pepper, a couple of guys who were involved in Lipscomb's run last year. So it's a veteran squad as opposed to Wichita State, which is a young squad. You get to the bright lights of Madison Square Garden here, and in some ways I would trust the veteran team a little bit more. Obviously, Greg Marshall's got a ton of experience in NCAA tournaments, so he can bring that to his kids. Lipscomb, not so much. So, from the mental part of the game, it's a little bit difficult to handicap. I think if it had to be played, if you were forced to make a bet on this one, I would probably look toward this game going over. I think Lipscomb finds ways to force tempo no matter how you want to play. And again, Greg Marshall's been around the block more than once, and I'm sure he doesn't want to get into a track meet with Lipscomb, but there are times when, quick threes and you get a rebound and you just want to run. It's human nature for especially a young team to just want to get out and go. And I think Lipscomb can speed them up a little bit. Lipscomb is the better shooting team for sure. Like I say, the more veteran team, I kind of trust them more. But I think that we see the line move, and a pretty solid line move toward Wichita State, because people are riding what they consider to be the hot club right now. Wichita State's been hot for quite some time. Lipscomb kind of, meds a Mets down the stretch, but they really picked it up through the ASUN tournament and into this tournament. For me, I might take a look at the over. Right now, Lipscomb's 3 games in the NIT. And remember, they had no easy road, Drew. Lipscomb did not draw one home game this entire tournament. They went on the road for all 3, played Davidson, a slow team. Their Ken Palm tempo rating over 300. They had to play NC Greensboro, again, a defensive-minded team, not one to want to push pace all that often. Then they played NC State. All 3 of those games, they averaged 171 points, 170.7 to be exact, so almost 171. That's well above what we're asked to lay here. And, Wichita State, tempo-wise, is no different than, in fact, they're a little quicker than Davidson and maybe a little quicker than NC Greensboro. So I think Lipscomb might be able to get the pace up a little bit here. We'll see if there are nerves involved. If there are, sometimes over 150 is tough to get when there's nerves involved. But I think Lipscomb's veteran enough to shake those early.
Okay, and we're talking the Tuesday night NIT card with Robbie Vino. It's $9 Monday on sportsmemo.com, and the Tuesday handicapper discounted to just $2 is Alex B. Smith. We got 9:30 Eastern tip Tuesday night on ESPN, Texas versus TCU. 138 the total. Looks like -1 TCU laying in this one. Some -1.5s out there, Robbie. This is an interesting matchup as well. I mean, Texas didn't look good in the early start of this NIT tournament, but they find themselves in the Final Four of the NIT. Not necessarily covering games. Last game they covered, but the first 2 didn't look good. Kind of lucky to get out of it, but nonetheless, they're within 2 wins of winning the whole tournament. So you think Texas can keep this rolling?
Yeah, and they've had their share of personnel issues, right? We go back to last third of the season when their star guard Kerwin Roach was suspended, since brought back to the team, but only in the capacity of a 6th man, although he's playing pretty close to starter minutes right now. In fact, I would say he's playing starters minutes right now. But you lose Roach for a few games, have to deal with that. And then one of their top bigs, freshman Jackson Hayes, goes down in this tournament. They lose him, I think, in game 1, and they've had to overcome that. Now, I'll say this. They got the benefit of the doubt as far as getting every single game at home and catching Colorado, their most recent win, after Colorado had played 2 nights before and then had to travel real quick to Austin. A lot of these travel teams, Drew, we hit on it a little bit during previous podcasts, but in these lesser tournaments where teams look like the committee was just trying to eliminate them by sending them out on the road. Then if sending them out on the road wasn't good enough, let's put them on short rest and send them out on the road again. And when it got to that point, those teams started dropping like flies. They couldn't last that long. And for Colorado, a team that actually had a couple of home games, it was probably the quick turnaround that did them in, because they were never really close in the game against Texas, which got Texas here into the Final Four. So I would say they were a beneficiary of the schedule. That's not to say TCU wasn't. They got to play everything at home. They got the same accommodations or friendly accommodations from the NIT committee. So it's almost as if, they wanted both of these teams to be here. I know TCU was a 1 seed in their bracket, so certainly committee was hoping to get them here. Jamie Dixon, former Big East coach, back in the Garden. He's had his share of battles there, so nothing new for him. I like their point guard play, obviously, with Alex Robinson. You like Desmond Bain, for Kwetnoy. These TCU guys, those three especially, have been the core of this group all season long. When they were asked to play Texas earlier in the season, it's hard to use that game as a gauge, Drew, only because you have so many personnel differences between then and now. For TCU, it's a team that had to readjust and go 4 guard. For Texas, like I say, they've overcome a couple of things. So I think if I'm trying to fundamentally break this game down, I would just use current form. Current form, to me, is on the side of TCU. Again, a team that would love to play pace. Texas would love to play slow and defense. I think the subtraction of Hayes from the lineup might make them a little bit more vulnerable on the boards. TCU is not a good rebounding team, not a large team by any stretch in the paint, but without Hayes, maybe they can negate that rebounding edge enough to where their shooting, their free throw shooting, their tempo, they own edges in all of those areas. So for me, it would probably be TCU in this game. I think the bettors kind of look at it the same way right now. We saw Texas open as a 1-point favorite, TCU now as high as 1.5. I kind of agree with that line move. I think at this current time, TCU is just a better team.
Robbie, great breakdown of the NIT and CBI here, and what a lot of people are waiting for, I'm sure, is the Final Four breakdowns from Robbie Vino. It is $9 Monday on Sportsmemo.com, and if you listen to this on Tuesday, $2 Tuesday, 2 great days to check out the site. Robbie, we got Auburn versus Virginia, Texas Tech versus Michigan State for it all. They're the 2 Final Four games on Saturday night, the championship game on Monday. Let's start off at the top here. 6:09 Eastern tip. The Auburn Tigers, Virginia Cavaliers. Line came out 5.5, 130.5 as the total. That's 5.5 Virginia laying in this one. It's the 1 seed Virginia Cavaliers. I know a lot of people had them here versus the 5 seed Auburn Tigers, and I'm sure not a lot of people had them, the 5 seed Auburn, making it to the Final Four. They were the only 5 seed to make it out of the first round. They find themselves in the Final Four. It's been a heck of a run for Auburn. Fun to watch. What's your overall thoughts here? Your kind of first initial thoughts here, the Auburn-Virginia matchup?
Boy, can you remember back to, it seems like so long ago, but do you remember back to the opening game for Auburn against New Mexico State?
Yes, I
do. Where the New Mexico State kid had the open layup at the end to tie it, passed out for 3. 3-point shooter got fouled, had an opportunity to win the game, blows 2 free throws, Auburn escapes, and from there, they've been dominant. Mowed through Kansas, mowed through North Carolina, and I shouldn't say they were dominant against Kentucky, but seeing that they were shorthanded without Chuma Okike to help them out on the front line, they were only out-rebounded 38-33 yesterday. Great job by Bruce Pearl's team. They got behind early. They weren't shooting well early, but they got it together and, of course, extended out in overtime to get themselves the win. So you have to give them all the credit in the world. This is another difficult matchup. We saw something interesting out of Tony Bennett in their most recent contest against Purdue, which again was another barn burner. I mean, Carson Edwards, it's a shame he got eliminated from the tournament because he played his heart out, but Virginia played well in that game too. And what we saw there, Tony Bennett, his team was getting beat up on the glass a little bit and inside, and he went to 2 bigs for a while. Not only Diakite, their starting center, but they went to Diakite and Jack Salt together. And I'm just wondering if they're going to do that in this contest to kind of punish Auburn on the boards. It'll be an interesting chess match between the two. Bruce Pearl is not going to change anything he does. Tony Bennett's not going to change anything he does as far as style is concerned. So you get that great contrast and who can impose their will on the other side. For me, it's hard to see Auburn winning if, in fact, Jared Harper and Bryce Brown don't play the way they played yesterday. Those two guys combined for 50 points. Auburn only scored 77. Those two guys go 15 of 16 from the free throw line to win that game against Kentucky. Virginia's got far more shooting ability than Kentucky does, Drew. You watched that game yesterday, and if P.J. Washington doesn't have the ball in his hands, then you don't fear anybody on Kentucky down the stretch in that game. And it's interesting because Coach Cal basically wanted the ball in P.J. Washington's hands every single time. I don't think he trusted anybody else on that squad. So Virginia's got multiple guys, whether it's Kyle Guy, whether it's Ty Jerome, whether it be DeAndre Hunter. They've got more options, and I think maybe they outlast Auburn here. That being said, the point spread to me shows value to the Auburn side. My numbers showed Virginia to be a 3.5 point choice here, not a 5.5. So it might be a little inflated toward the UVA side. Auburn's on a great wave right now. We'll look into the game a little bit more as time goes on. I know you have numbers that you keep that show maybe something toward the total here. I haven't really dug that deep into the total yet for this game.
Yeah, watching Auburn, I think that this game, from a tempo standpoint, is a fascinating handicap. Virginia slows everybody they play down, and we got Auburn on the other hand. They've been able to speed people up, and when they seem like a tough team to slow down, but we do know it's easier to slow teams down than to speed teams up. And you're right, this Virginia team offensively brings a lot more to the table than Kentucky did. Kentucky has the same athletes, if not better athletes, but scoring ability, I feel, is there with Virginia. So it will be a fun one to watch. That is the early game on Saturday, April 6th, coming up. In the late game, we got 8:49 approximated tip. Texas Tech versus Michigan State. Both of these games on CBS. It's Texas Tech, the 3 seed, versus the number 2 seed, Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State laying 2.5 in early market trading, 132. 133 being the total, anywhere in between there. So some opinion on this total with Texas Tech, Michigan State from the sports books. How do you initially view Texas Tech, Michigan State, Robbie?
Yeah, and real quick, Drew, I'm just going to go back for 5 seconds here just to say that Carson Edwards single-handedly was able to speed, maybe not speed Virginia up, but he was able to get that game over the total rather easily. That game was listed or closed at 127. I had a play on that game going over, and it was never in doubt. Carson Edwards single-handedly, because of his shooting ability, got UVA to take some quicker shots, and the second half really went, for Virginia, up and down, and everybody made shots. You could almost see Jared Harper putting on, or Bryce Brown putting on the same type of display, because they're the same type athlete that Carson Edwards is, with that type of range and shooting ability. You could almost see them. Here we're only looking at 130, so maybe something fundamentally to think of if you're going to go play the total in that game. For Texas Tech and Michigan State, I don't know that I could doubt Texas Tech whatsoever now, Drew. I thought Gonzaga had the upper hand on this team in that game on Saturday, and Texas Tech proved me wrong. The defense was amazing once again. Jarrett Culver was amazing once again. He got a little help in that contest from Mooney and Moretti, which he needs for this team to continue advancing. But they had some foul difficulties in that game. Didn't matter. They faced a team that's just loaded with scoring options. It didn't matter. Michigan State's basically Gonzaga, if you ask me, and maybe they're Gonzaga with a little less height, because I don't know that Michigan State pounds you inside the way that Brandon Clark and Hachimura do for Gonzaga. So for Texas Tech, I don't know that this matchup is much different. We know one thing, having a long time off between Saturday and Sunday's games and this coming weekend's games, it'll help Tom Izzo's team a bunch, because the elation after that win over Duke, 1 point win over Duke, and the fashion that they did it in, I think they need that time to come off of cloud nine. Izzo very good at motivating his players. He'll have them ready to go. But again, Chris Beard's a guy we have to bring up on this podcast, because his coaching ability really being seen on a national level right now. I haven't seen anybody yet, Drew. You tell me if you think any different. I haven't seen a single person yet find a way to guard Jarrett Culver when he wants to score. When he wants to get to the rim, he gets to the rim. If he wants to shoot a three, he finds a way to get open for the three, and he shoots free throws well. To me right now, Texas Tech doesn't seem phased. They seem like a better defensive team to me than Michigan State, and I don't know that it's going to be that hard for them, or any harder than it was for them to contain Gonzaga. Especially Gonzaga got to play that game on the West Coast. Didn't matter. For me, it might be Texas Tech in that matchup.
Yeah, and that's a good point with the location as well, as far as this one being in Minneapolis. So I guess all the teams have the extra preparation time, but still something to keep in mind as far as where the game is going to be played. I will follow it up with one question. I mean, Cassius Winston, in my opinion, Robbie, is the most underrated point guard in the country. As far as how good he'll be in a shot in the NBA, I don't know. But just in college basketball, I do think he's a step up as far as what the Texas Tech defense is going to have to contend with. He's a very cerebral player, very smart player, very well-coached player. So if you're looking towards Texas Tech, how much does Cassius Winston at the point guard for Michigan State scare you?
Well, I'll say this. If you go through the list of point guards that Texas Tech has had to face so far, you would put Cassius Winston on the top of that list. I don't think that Josh Perkins is a better point guard than Cassius Winston. If you go back to the Michigan game, I really don't believe Xavier Simpson is a better point guard than Cassius Winston. If you go back to the Buffalo game, of course, they're loaded with guards, but their main assets are their shooting guards and swingmen. So better at point guard is Cassius Winston, and then Northern Kentucky. So that's, from a matchup perspective, it's something that they haven't dealt with yet. This is an elite point guard who can, once again, find his shot at the rim. He can find his shot from distance, and he runs that team real well. So that's a good point as far as Michigan State's concerned. Probably if you're sizing them up, if you're trying to use Gonzaga, as I was, as a comparison of opponents for Texas Tech, I think you clearly have to give point guard edge to Michigan State. Texas Tech hasn't seen one as good as him through this tournament.
All right, Robbie, great breakdowns all the way through. Guys, check out Rob Vino's page on sportsmemo.com. You can check out all of the Sports Memo website. $9 Monday, every play discounted to just $9. Robbie Vino has 5 plays listed. You can get them all. You can get one, all of them, just $9. MLB Monday, premier game of the night up there. Normally priced at $25. Right now, just $9. Also, he's got another 15-star, another 4%er, a bunch of them up here at sportsmemo.com. Great day to check out the website. Rob, thanks for the time. Anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
No, just as we always say, Drew, good luck to everybody out there trying to cash tickets. Keep cashing them, and we'll talk to you later in the week for sure. Maybe get a little more in-depth into that NCAA tournament.
Yeah, how's your schedule looking? Friday look good for you on the pod?
Absolutely. Friday will be fantastic.
All right, we'll have Robbie Vino on Friday. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Check out the site, $9 Monday, and best of luck with your bets. We'll be back tomorrow talking more sports betting. So thanks for tuning in.
Oh, yes, my home is definitely my castle. It's a bit of a ruin, and the bathroom could date from the 14th century.
Time to give your home an upgrade? Then it's time you talked to Avantcard. You can borrow from €5,000 to €75,000. We approve in principle in minutes, and you can even benefit from personalised pricing. Find out more at avantcard.ie.
And that carpet could be circa 1976.
Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Avantcard DAC trading as Avantcard is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The value continues for the jump season at Ladbrokes as the race that stops a nation approaches in the form of the Aintree Grand National. And in all of Ladbrokes Republic of Ireland retail shops, we are paying out on the first 6 home. That's 6 places at a fifth of the odds on the Aintree Grand National at Ladbrokes. Over 18s, T's and C's apply.